Think. Feel. It is like a finger pointing away to the moon. Don't concentrate on the finger or you will miss all that heavenly glory.
Roy Albert DeMeo was born in 1942 in Bath Beach, Brooklyn into a working-class Italian immigrant family. As a teen, he began a small loan sharking operation which turned into a full-time job by the age of 17. DeMeo graduated from James Madison High School in 1959. He began working in a criminal enterprise while maintaining legitimate business practices. He married shortly after high school and fathered 3 children. He worked his way up the criminal career ladder through a continued loan sharking operation. Gambino soldier Anthony Gaggi took notice of DeMeo and told him that he could make even more money with his successful business if he came to work directly for the Gambino family. Through the late 1960s, DeMeo's organized crime prospects increased on 2 fronts. He continued in the loan sharking business with Gaggi, and began developing a crew of young men involved in car theft and drug trafficking. It was this collective of criminals that would become known both in the underworld and in law enforcement circles as the DeMeo Crew. The first member of the crew was Chris Rosenberg, who met DeMeo in 1966 at the age of 16. Rosenberg was dealing drugs at a Canarsie gas station, and Roy helped him increase his business and profits by loaning Chris money so that he could deal the narcotics in larger amounts. By 1972, Chris had introduced his friends to Roy and they began working for him as well. The members of the crew included Joseph Guglielmo, Roy's cousin, Joseph Tesla, Anthony Center and Joseph's younger brother Patrick Tesla. In late 1974, a conflict that had erupted between the DeMeo Crew and a young body shop owner named Andre Katz had continued to escalate. In May 1975, Roy was informed by a police officer that, as a result of this conflict, Andre was cooperating with authorities. In June he was lured to a place where he could be confronted. After being abducted, he was stabbed to death and then dismembered. An accomplice who helped bait Katz confessed her role, and Joseph Tesla and Henry Borelli were both arrested. They would secure an acquittal at trial in January 1976. This was the first known murder committed by the DeMeo Crew, and for years was thought to have been the first occasion where Roy or members of his crew had dismembered a body for disposal. In 2003, however, new information was provided to the FBI by Bonanno underboss Salvatore Vitali, who claimed that in 1974 he was ordered to deliver the corpse of a man who had just been murdered to a garage in Queens so that it could be disposed of. When he arrived at the location, Vitali claims, Roy DeMeo was present along with several other men who may have been early members of the DeMeo Crew. Vitali also claims that Roy had a knife with him, presumably to dismember the corpse. This information suggests that DeMeo and his followers may have been involved in murder and dismemberment earlier than previously thought by law enforcement. As the 1970s continued, Roy cultivated his followers into a crew experienced with the process of murdering and dismembering victims. With the exception of killings intended to send a message to any who would hinder their criminal activities, or murders that presented no other alternative, a set method of execution was established by Roy and crew to ensure that victims would be dispatched quickly and then made to disappear. The method of execution was dubbed the Gemini method, named after the Gemini Lounge, the primary hangout of the DeMeo Crew as well as the site where most of the crew's victims were killed. The exact process of the Gemini method, revealed by multiple crew members and associates who became government witness in the early 1980s, was as follows. Typically, the victim would be lured through the side door of the lounge, and into the apartment that made up the back portion of the building. At this point, a crew member, almost always Roy DeMeo, according to crew member turned government witness Frederick Denham, would approach with a silenced pistol in one hand and a towel in the other, shooting the victim in the head and wrapping the towel around the victim's head wound like a turban in order to staunch the blood flow. Immediately after, another member of the crew, originally Chris Rosenberg up until his 1979 murder, according to government witness testimony, would stab the victim in the heart in order to prevent any more blood from pumping out of the gunshot wound. By then the victim would be dead, at which point the body would be stripped of its clothing and dragged into the bathroom, where it was left while the remaining blood drained out and/or congealed within the body. This was to eliminate the messiness of the next step, when crew members would place the body onto plastic tarps laid out in the main room and proceed to dismember it, cutting off the arms, legs and head. The body parts would then be put into bags, placed in cardboard boxes and sent off to the Flatlands Avenue dump in Brooklyn, where so many tons of garbage were dropped each day that it was a near impossibility for the bodies to ever be discovered. During the initial stages of an early 1980s federal state task force targeting the DeMeo Crew, a plan by authorities to excavate sections of the dump in order to locate remains of victims was aborted when it was deemed too costly and likely to fail at locating any meaningful evidence. In the fall of 1976, the Gambino family went through a massive change when its boss Carlo Gambino died of natural causes. Paul Castellano was named the boss, with Aniello Delacroce retaining the position of underboss. The implications of this were twofold for Roy. His superior, Nino, was elevated to the position of capo, taking over the crew of men Castellano headed. This promotion was beneficial for Roy, whose mentor was now even closer to the ruling Gambino hierarchy. Another advantage was that now that Carlo Gambino had died, new associates would be eligible for membership into the family. Castellano did not immediately open the books for new members, however, opting instead to promote existing members and change around leadership of the crews he now presided over. He reportedly told Gaggi he was against the idea of DeMeo ever being made for a number of reasons. Castellano's illegal activities focused more on white-collar crime, and it was said by both law enforcement and other mafiosi that he looked at himself as more of a businessman than a gangster. He looked down on the street guys, such as Roy, who were involved in things like auto theft and hijacking. Additionally, Castellano felt DeMeo was unpredictable and did not feel he could be controlled. Nino's attempts at persuading Castellano to consider inducting Roy were continually rejected. Despite the considerable contributions Roy had already made to the Gambinos, not least of which were his tens of thousands of dollars worth of weekly payments to Nino Gaggi. By spring of 1977, DeMeo was still not a made member. Reportedly distraught at the situation, Roy continued to look for more opportunities to bring in larger amounts of profit to his superiors. DeMeo found what he needed to ensure that he would be officially inducted into the Gambino family when he formed an alliance with a gang of Irish-American criminals known as the Wisties, soon to be headed by James Coonan. Coonan's only obstacle to assuming control of the West Side and its lucrative money-making enterprise was Mickey Spillane, the mainstay of criminal activities in the area for 20 years. In May 1977, Roy and Edward Grillo murdered Spillane at the behest of Coonan, who then became the top criminal figure in the West Side. Roy, sensing an opportunity to create a vast source of income for his superiors, informed Anthony Gaggi of the possibilities of a partnership between the Wisties and the Gambino family. Shortly afterwards, Coonan and his second-in-command Mickey Featherstone were called to a meeting with Paul Castellano, becoming the de facto arm of the Gambino crime family and agreeing to share 10% of all profits. In exchange, the Wisties would be privy to several lucrative union deals and take on murder contracts for the Italians. By 1978, Roy was heard bragging to associates that he had murdered 100 people. It was also during this year that he put out word among not just the Gambino family but the other New York Cosa Nostra families as well that he and his crew were available for murder contracts. In at least one case, the crew charged a relatively paltry fee of $5,000. Other murders were committed for free, Roy describing them to crew members as professional favors. Roy and the crew was Chris Rosenberg, Roy's second-in-command within the group and purportedly his most loyal ally. Rosenberg had set up a drug deal with a Cuban man living in Florida and then murdered him and his associates when they traveled to New York to complete the sale. The Cuban had connections with a Colombian drug cartel and violence was threatened between the Colombians and the Gambino family unless Rosenberg was murdered. Roy was ordered to kill Rosenberg but stalled for weeks. During this period of time, Roy committed his most public murder on April 19, 1979, the victim being a college student with no criminal ties named Dominic Ragucci who was paying for his tuition by being a door-to-door salesman. DeMeo saw Ragucci parked outside his house and assumed it was an assassin. After a car chase, which consisted of Freddie Dinome at the wheel with Roy DeMeo and Joseph Guglielmo hanging out of the windows firing wildly, Guglielmo even shot holes in the car's floorboards in his excitement. Ragucci was shot to death by Roy when his car became too damaged to continue driving. Roy, convinced it was an assassin from the drug cartel, returned home and gathered his family. He drove them out of New York and left them at a hotel for a short time. By 1982, the FBI was investigating the enormous number of missing and murdered persons who were linked to DeMeo or who had last been seen entering the Gemini Lounge. It is around this time that an FBI bug in the home of Gambino family soldier Angelo Ruggiero picked up a conversation between Angelo and Gene Gotti, a brother of Capo John Gotti. In the conversation, it is discussed that Paul Castellano had put out a hit on DeMeo, but was having difficulty finding someone willing to do the job. Gene Gotti mentions that his brother John was wary of taking the contract, as DeMeo had an army of killers around him. It is also mentioned in this same secretly recorded conversation that, at that time, John had killed fewer than 10 people, while DeMeo had killed at least 38. According to mob turncoat Salvatore Gravano, eventually the contract was given to Frank DeSico, but Frank and his crew couldn't get to DeMeo either. DeSico allegedly handed the job to Roy's own men. Albert DeMeo wrote that in his final days, Roy was paranoid and knew that he would be killed soon. DeMeo considered faking his own death and leaving the country. However, instead he left the house one day and never returned. Albert DeMeo later found Roy's personal belongings such as his watch, wallet, and ring in his study room, and also a religious pamphlet indicating that Roy had gone to confession before his death. According to the book Murder Machine, in his final days Roy DeMeo was seen wearing a leather jacket, with a shotgun concealed underneath. On January 10, 1983, DeMeo went to crew member Patrick Testa's body shop for a meeting with his men. A few days later, on January 18, he was found murdered in his abandoned car's trunk. He had been shot multiple times in the head and had a bullet wound in his hand, assumed by law enforcement as being from throwing his hand up to his face in a self-defense reflex when the shots were fired at him. Anthony Gaggi was suspected by law enforcement officials of being the one who personally killed DeMeo, although it is likely crew members Joseph Testa and Anthony Center were present as well. Gaggi was not charged with the crime, although he was charged with a number of other murders. He died of a heart attack during his trial in 1988, aged 62. According to Anthony Casso's 2008 biography, Roy DeMeo was killed at Patrick Testa's East Flatbush home by Joseph Testa and Anthony Center following an agreement with Casso, who was given the contract by Gotti and DeSico after they were unable to kill DeMeo during the fall of 1982. The Casso biography notes that DeMeo was seated, about to receive coffee, when Testa and Center opened fire. Anthony Gaggi was not present. In April 1984, Colombo crime family soldier Ralph Scopo was overheard explaining to an associate that DeMeo had been killed by his own family because they merely suspected that he would not be able to stand up to legal charges that resulted from his stolen car ring. The motive as suggested by Scopo is widely accepted by law enforcement and other sources. Another reason was that DeMeo was attracting too much attention from the FBI. DeMeo's crew was soon rounded up and the core members Henry Borelli, Joseph Tesla, and Anthony Center were in prison for life after 2 trials that saw them convicted of a collective total of 25 murders, in addition to extortion, car theft and drug trafficking. The convictions were secured in large part by testimony of former members Frederick Denham and Dominic Montiglio.